Okay, so welcome everyone to the Leopard Solutions Law Firm Index webinar. And I'm going to share my screen for a minute. So if my presenters could just give me a thumbs up that you guys can see my slides. Can you see my screen? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great. So welcome everyone. Like I said, we're here today to talk about the Leopard Law Firm Index and to get our speakers viewpoints on the research that Laura will be presenting. So lots of exciting things. Just wanted to tell you guys where this index lives because it is on the Leopard Solutions website. So you'll see here right from the homepage, you just click under resources and you're going to see a list of, company, and you'll see Law Firm Indexes right at the top here. And once you click on that, you'll see it'll take like a second or two for the page to populate with the latest data, which is updated 2 times per week. So this is up to date as possible, more up to date than any other ranking out there, which is why this is so useful for any size firm. And Laura will get into that. So you'll read here about the different parameters and the different things we use to rank firms. And you'll see the firms here, and we'll go into the firms. So this is a look at the top of the top here. And I just, wanted to mention today is International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day to all of the women on here. The theme this year is Break the Bias. And one of the things that we are doing in conjunction with ARC is working on a women leaving law survey. There have been an extraordinary amount of women leaving the profession of law, particularly within the top 200 firms. And what we are doing right now is to find out why. So if you know of a woman who has left the industry, if you are one of those people yourself, gone on to do something else, particularly during the pandemic, we'd love to hear from you. I'm going to be putting a few links in the chat. And one of those is a link to take the survey. And we'd love for you to pass that along. And the results of the survey will be published in late May. We also have a webinar coming up next week with MacEwen, a recruiting solution, and that's all about streamlining your recruiting process from start to finish. I will also put a link to that in the chat. And then finally, you can link in with us. Please do. This is our link to our company page. I will also put a link to that. And now I'd like our speakers to just give us a quick view of introduce yourselves if you can. So Brian, I did this alphabetically.
Okay.
Can you start?
All right. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Laura. Thanks for having me. I'm really delighted to be here and talk about this this index, which is something I really believe in. I'm Brian Dalton. I'm Senior Vice President, Editorial Director at Breaking Media, which is a B2B digital publisher. We're in a number of spaces, including the legal space, of course, where our brand is Above the Law, which I presume a certain amount of familiarity with our audience here. And again, really glad to be part of this discussion.
Awesome. And if you guys don't know what Above the Law is, you've probably been living under a rock. I can tell you I've talked to Brian many times and said we used to check the comments furiously when I was in-house at a law firm. So Above the Law has morphed into so much more than that and has so many.
Getting rid of the comments was one of our smartest moves of the last.
Yeah. So we should definitely check out for Above the Law. And Brian, if there's a link you can put to a newsletter, please feel free to do that also in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, Laura, tell us about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Leopard, and I'm the CEO and a founder of Leopard Solutions. And we are so happy to be presenting information about our law firm index today with my friends here. And I think I'm going to show you some really cool insights. But I'll plug again at the end. I'm going to turn back around and talk about that Women in Law survey. You know, we're a woman-owned business here at Leopard Solutions, and this is a topic that's very close to my heart. So I really want to get as much data as possible so we can really present to the world why women are leaving top 200 firms and the law. And I hope you'll help us out and pass that link around amongst your friends. But today, it's all about the Law Firm Index.
Awesome. Thank you. And Laura is one of the women that I look up to the most. So I will also put a link to Laura's very inspirational Women Who Wow profile, which is on my blog. So follow Laura. I will put links to everyone's LinkedIn profiles as well. So Bruce, we're up to you. Tell us about you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, if you're in the Eastern time zone. I'm the president founder of Adam Smith Esquire. We're a boutique management consultancy, boutique in the sense that both we're a small company and our only clients are law firms. We deal with law firms, strategy, compensation, governance, partnership structures, office footprint, practice areas, etc. We have been in business for 20 years. I was a practicing securities lawyer on Wall Street before that, a couple of big law firms, neither of which is still around. Not my fault. In-house at Morgan Stanley for several years as a securities lawyer. We're based in New York, but we operate globally. Even through COVID lockdown, we operated virtually globally. Happy to going to Europe in a couple of weeks, which will be a first for a couple of years. I'm delighted to be on this webinar. Thank you again, Laura, for making it possible. My company and Brian's, well above the law, had a hand, as you'll see, in designing the Leopard Law Firm Index. For various reasons, we thought there was a need for a different law firm ranking tool in the industry, which is, I assume, one of the things we will get into this afternoon. So again, delighted to be here, and thank you for the audience.
Well, we will definitely delve into that. And for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Stephanie Marone. I've become a professional, I think, moderator lately, and I work with Leopard on a number of initiatives in the marketing space and a number of other clients. But what I love about my work with Leopard is that it really does make a difference in terms of what has happened in the last 2 years in this incredibly crazy recruiting and retention market. And the company is doing such amazing things with regard to legal intelligence. I was in-house for about 20 years at various law firms, big law. I knew Brian very well from my days then, and now I can look at it from a different perspective, and now I consult with mostly small and mid-sized firms. Okay, so thank you. And now, Laura, I'm going to pass it over to you, and I will, while you're presenting, put links to all of those things that I promised. So please do take a look at those links in the chat.
Okay, great. Okay. So today we're going to talk about our Leopard Law Firm Index that we created, with our friends from Above the Law and Adam Smith Esquire. About 3 years ago, we all sat around talking and came up with a revolutionary idea, right? We all agreed that current forms of law firm rankings and rating systems really weren't working in today's world. So we started back in 2019 discussing how a new system might work and why it's so desperately needed in today's modern world, right? We all agreed that what might have worked years ago is not working today in this fast-paced environment that we all live in. Times change, and the system of measurement needs to change in order to deliver accurate, actionable results. We thought a list that couldn't change throughout the year couldn't possibly accommodate real life occurrences. Things happen throughout the year. And as the situation and the market changes, that rating of the firm also needs to change. And we also all agreed that self-reported data should not be an acceptable data set used for ranking purposes. It just doesn't make sense to do that. So self-reported numbers are quasi numbers that may or may not be accurate. And we knew that the ranking systems of old really had some systemic flaws because of that. And there are many best of lists and types of firm rankings. And the one thing that they all have in common is that they are fixed in time, right? They're a snapshot. And a snapshot cannot reflect the true world of the moment. It just shows what was true in the past. Old data is legacy data, and because it's too old to be accurate, legacy data means you are operating with outdated insights. And it means that internal decisions are being made with bad intelligence. Your benchmarking could be skewed, your market insights off the mark. It's like trying to navigate somewhere with an old map, right? It might lead you to the wrong place. And legacy data really extracts a price. A one-dimensional rank that is largely assigned to self-reported financial is just flawed, in our opinion, from the start. A multi-dimensional analysis reduces bias. It eliminates perceptions and provides a fresh and all-encompassing view. A ranking that is assigned once a year is virtually dead on arrival because that data was collected months before. And by the time you receive it, it's old data. And our Leopard Law Firm Index, it changes with every posting. And we post twice a week. It also opens the door for firms not traditionally found on ranking systems. And our Leopard Law Firm Index shows where these firms are now, not where they were 6 months ago or a year ago. So what makes a firm successful? We all got in a room many times and we started throwing around ideas about what elements you need to really measure the success of a firm. Like what data points could we measure? Should we measure? How should we do it? So after working for many months, we came up with a pyramid of sorts of how we were going to weigh the results of these data. So at the top of the pyramid, we have how many people are promoted at the firm, how many promotions to partner happen. In the middle of the pyramid was sort of like a medium weight. We have the growth decline in revenue per lawyer over a 5-year span. And these are for the firms that have, announced their financials through the years. We're not looking at a single financial, we're looking at the trajectory. For firms where we don't have financials, we do drop that data point out. We're also looking in success in lateral recruitment and retention of partners and associates. We have some insider scores that our friends at Above the Law collected, and those were also figured in at a medium weight. This is an ongoing survey that people can take on the Above the Law website. We also wanted to measure the success in recruitment and retention of entry-level lawyers as well. Then at the bottom of the pyramid, we have those things that we really put the heaviest weight on. And the first thing is the tenure at the firm. Like, what is the average lawyer tenure at the firm? Because we felt that really spoke to the relative stability at the firm. Does the average stay 3 years? Is it 10 years, 15 years? All of that can make a big difference. And then we also are looking at that growth decline number. Are they losing people? Are they gaining people? That's a really important number. And then last year, we also put ethnic diversity numbers into the mix. So if they have a great ethnic diversity number, they're going to get a nice boost for that in our profile. So these were all the measurements that we put together in order to start ranking all the firms. And as Stephanie mentioned, if you go to our resources tab, this is open to the public. You can go and see our top 250 law firms. It's public facing, and we only show that top 250 and their scores. But these are not the only firms that have a score. We score firms across all of our database, small firms, medium firms. They all contain a Leopard Index score if we have monitored them for over 12 months, and they're largely based in the US. And this score is seen in multiple reports. It's in the BI suite, it's in Firmscape. So that score really comes into play when you're looking for acquisition targets, when you're looking for merger partners, when you're looking to convince a candidate to move to a firm or to stay at a firm. So it's really important that we democratized this score and that every firm in the system receives a score because they deserve one, right? So our index changes all the time. But that also presented a problem because everybody likes to have an official rank, right? So your rank could change from month to month or quarter to quarter. So what we did was we looked back at 2021 and we took the average score numbers of all of the firms to see like who's the top 10. What firms were consistently or most consistently in the top 10 in the Leopard Law Firm Index. And these are all great firms. Some of them have different numbers in other ranking systems, but these were the most consistently ranked among the top 10. This is a great, great score for them to have. And as you can see, because we cover all firms, you have firms in this list that aren't in other ranking systems. So these are the top 10, but then we also wanted to look for a different kind of winner. And these were firms that actually gained the most points within last year of 2021. So Foster Garvey, they started the year with a low score of 48. But during the year, they gained 251 points in their survey. They really started knocking it out of the ballpark. So that is an amazing score. And they gained the most points of any firm in the index. Then you have, Cahill, they gained 160 points last year. So these were all firms that were making a big push and really started to look better than they had during the pandemic. So all of these firms should be congratulated for the enormous numbers that they racked up in 2021. If I look at all of the firms that we're currently looking at in the index, 291 firms saw a two-step drop. And what I mean by step is, we assign different categories to the index. We have very good, good, fair, and poor. So a two-step drop means you might have been very good and you moved lower to good and then lower down to fair. So that would be a two-step drop, and 290 firms saw that. We saw over 1,000 firms do a one-step drop. So they might have been good and moved to fair. They might have been fair and moved to poor, but they lost enough points that they took a step back. There were almost 1,600 firms that stayed in the same category. They may have had point fluctuations, as I'm sure that they did, but they managed to stay within that same category. There were 199 firms that stepped up. So they went from good to very good. They went from fair to good. They went from poor to fair, but they were able to claw their way back up in the index with decisions and moves that they made during 2021. So let's look at some individual firms and see what we saw there. So we're not going to name a name here, but this is traditionally a top 200 firm. And what we saw in 2021 was their growth decline metric was at -23. I know for a fact that it used to be worse than that. That was a slight improvement, but they were at -23. Their ethnically diverse attorney percentage decreased from 18% to 17%. Their retained experience decreased by 28%. And that's like the brain trust of the firm, right? These are partners. These are associates that have been there for 10 years. This is the brain trust of the firm, and it decreased by 28%. Now, in other ranking systems, their rank is 130. It's 130. And in our index, they have no ranking because they are below the 250. So that's a big difference. Their score at the end of December 2021 was only 118. And I think this can demonstrate, while using metrics that we're using can give you a real insight as to what's going on at the firm, because this firm is not ranked in our index at all. It has a score, but it's not ranked within the top 250. Now, here's a bright story. So Gunderson had a great year, right? Their attorney headcount increased from 11% to plus 35%. That's a big jump. They were doing a lot of recruitment. They were bringing on a lot of people. Their ethnically diverse attorney percentage increased from 26 to 29%. Let's all give a big yahoo to that one, because that's a remarkable statistic. We know how tight the market is for those ethnically diverse associates at this moment. Retained experience increased by 52%. And what that tells me is they're not bringing on a lot of junior people. They're bringing on a lot of people with a lot of experience, because that number went up to 52%. They are not ranked at all by other ranking systems. No ranking at all. And we certainly feel they deserve a rank, because in our system, they were given the rank of 51 in 2021. And looking at what they did last year, they deserve that ranking. They totally deserve that ranking. And once you know their ranking, if you do have a BI Suite subscription, you can go into the BI Suite and you can look at all of these individual data points, and they're benchmarked against all of their competing firms. And you can see exactly how and why the firms got the score that they got. So that's in the BI Suite, and it's our law firm index report, where you are benchmarked against your competing firms from all of the different points that we use to put together this score, because we didn't want it to be a question mark about how did they get that score or what did they do that year. We wanted to make it transparent, so we really spell it out for you in that report. And this is the retained experience graph. This is the growth decline graph. And that red line you see at the top is Gunderson, where they were outgrowing many of their competitors, and most of which are actually in another provider's, top 200 list. So Gunderson really killed it in 2021. Now let's look at a small firm, right? This is a smaller firm that would never register on most ranking systems at all. It just wouldn't show up. It's just too small. But this firm has a really remarkable story to tell. They went from a negative 27 in the growth decline report to a negative 3. That's gigantic. That's a gigantic stride for them. And that's an enormous change, and the firm has grown in the index for that. And it also had a better ROI for their lateral hiring that went from 80% to 100%. And they hired entry levels in 2021, and they also got a 100% ROI score. So their score itself increased from just 48 to 299. So we did talk about this firm earlier, but that was the leap that they made in points. And I'm sure they also moved in the status as well. So we think it's really important that we look at every firm, right? Not just the biggest and the behemoths and the ones that say they make the most money, but we want to know the health of every firm, because these are firms that you might want to acquire. These are firms that might be, a merger partner down the road, and you need to know the health and stability of these firms. And that's why we rank all the firms in our system, because every firm is important. And if you're going to do business with a firm, if you're going to recruit into a firm or out of a firm, you really should know the health of the firm. And we think our index is giving you the best possible indication of that. Every time we update our database, all of these metrics are looked at again, and the score is adjusted. And most of the time, it's just a point fluctuation, and it's not a big jump. But as you can see, there are lots of jumps that take place throughout the year. So if you want to take a look. If you are a member of our Leopard Top 250, we do have a beautiful social media badge that we're happy to give you. You can put it on your website, because your firm has achieved that status, which is really something. So if you need that badge, let us know, and we'll be happy to send it to you. And now I can't wait to hear what my partners in crime have to say about the index and what it tells.
All right.
Okay. So lots of interesting things here. What I love about the index is that there are firms that are not the usual suspects. Like there's no Cravath, there's no Skadden, there's no Paul Weiss. And it's not to say that they're not doing exceptionally well, but this measures things in such a different way. Plus, sometimes with those other ranking bodies, you see the results several months later. This is in real time. So we, with it being updated 2 times a week. So Bruce and Brian, what are your overall initial thoughts of the data? Are you surprised? Were there
my initial thought, Stephanie, flows right out of the point you were just making about it not being just sort of a lineup of the usual suspects. If we think about that slide with the top 10 as of today, it's a fascinating group of firms. And one thing that really jumps out at me is the presence of Dentons. And some of you might recall that about 5 years ago, Dentons as a firm, in an extraordinary move, essentially declared war on the AmLaw 100 and made even a dedicated website that was debunking its accounting practices. And it was quite an extraordinary statement by the firm, whatever you make of its merits. But I tend to think that that they had the larger point. And so its inclusion on the Leopard index list in the top 10 as of today, I find kind of a delightful little note. And then just sort of more generally speaking, you see Greenberg Traurig right up there with Latham and Kirkland, which is not a usual grouping that one might make for most industry observers. Greenberg's, obviously an excellent firm, but it's not really known as a market leader in compensation, for example. So to have, so obviously it's not just money or compensation driving the makeup of this list. You can't account for the various recruiting ROI and other metrics simply as a function of money. There's something else going on, and that's what makes this really great and useful, I think, as a resource.
It certainly was the most heterogeneous, let's just say that, collection of firms I've seen. So I don't want to step on you, Brian, but I wanted to just jump in with a slightly different perspective. One of the things that I think motivated us at Adam Smith Esquire and you and your colleagues at Above the Law, Brian, was extraordinary irritation at the integrity of the AmLaw numbers. And in particular, one of the things that has baffled me for a long time, and I'm coming at this as both a former securities lawyer, where you're interested in disclosure. Disclosure is God, right? I mean, what do the securities laws say? You can do anything that you disclose. Also, I was an economics major, as those in the audience who may know me know, and it's deeply affected my life. So one of the things that obviously the AmLaw focuses on, I mean, it's kind of the sun around which every other planet in the AmLaw system orbits, is profits per partner. And for 20 or 30 years, I have been scratching my head at what does profits per partner tell you about the health of a firm? As a going concern, as a sustainable concern, as a firm that satisfies its clients, that does good work, that attracts, high quality laterals who stay, that's a fabulous place to work, that turns out great professionals that go on to, take leading roles in government and business and everything else. Nothing.
And Bruce,
and it just has bugged the heck out of me. Brian, you're about
even a more superficial kind of take on it. You're positive. You're querying, like, what's the value in that metric. I can't get past who could possibly care what the partnership is raking. What does that tell a client? What does that it's a pointless status indicator. It doesn't really have any genuine meaning beyond the competitive, satisfying the competitive instincts of the partnerships involved. It has no.
One of the things that I look at is cross industry. Yes, I do run a boutique management consultancy dealing with law firms, but that is about 2% of US GDP these days, private law firm income revenue. So coming on the meeting today. So if you look at some of the biggest corporations in the Delta Airlines, Apple Computer. So what are the key performance indicators? Things like inventory turns. For ExxonMobil, it's
Bruce, sorry, we're losing your audio a little bit. You're kind of going in and
okay.
out. Yeah.
I'll do something to fix that in a second, but
We're losing you again, Bruce,
the
unfortunately.
point is they're all different things. I'm going to try something else. Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, while you're fixing that, there is I don't know many people who actually look at profits per partner like in terms of like recruiting, like deciding what firm to go to or any of those things. I mean, it does tell you the firm is probably doing well and that's a good thing, but that money's in the hands of the equity partners. So there's so many other categories that we track in this index that are not tracked by some of these other ones. And having been that person, by the way, which I do talk about a lot with Laura, as having filled out those surveys myself, working in-house, I know exactly how I can, kind of skirt around the system and the things we used to do to get ranked better. So all of those things, you can't do that with this one, which is why I like it and why I like seeing firm names that you would not get to see normally.
Among the many sort of merits or assets of the index, it's dynamism, it's sort of ungameability, the fact it draws on objective, verifiable data points, I think is, again, goes to utility. The value is that it addresses issues of the highest interest. I mean, it's not, the use cases are various, but let's talk about potential recruits, right? The questions it answers, or at least addresses, are of the highest interest to potential recruits. Do people tend to stay around and develop at the firm? Do people actually make partner? How experienced are the lawyers at the firm? I mean, these metrics have vastly more to say about firm culture and professional development than some self-reported revenue number or prestige ranking or what have you.
Yeah. And I think, we added ethnic diversity to the pyramid last year.
Mm-hmm.
And as time goes on, there may be other data points that we want to add. One thing that we're going to be watching really carefully is how long it takes to make partner at these firms. I think eventually that's going to make a big difference in employee retention. If the road to partnership is virtually impossible, you're not going to have a lot of people hanging on there to try to, reach that brass ring. So there are other data points that we can have under consideration. This is a dynamic index. And as new things come to the forefront, we can add them to this index if we think it's really going to measure the health of the firm. There are so many things to talk about. This was initially, when we first started talking in 2019, it was going to be called the Health Index. And then COVID hit and we said, oh, we can't call it the Health Index. We've got to do something else. So it just became the Leopard Law Firm Index. But essentially at its core, it really is a health index. We're looking at the health of the firm. That's why the retained experience is so important. Not just the growth decline metric, but who is staying? Is it the real brain trust at the firm? And the ROI ROI is sort of a short-term ROI, because we're only looking at the past 12 months. And at that point, we figure the return on investment of hires should be 100% across the board within the last 12 months, right? And if you have a really bad number, that's why it impacts the index. But it's going to be fluid as time goes on, as we discover other data points that could really instruct us about, the health of the firm. Then we'll consider adding it. But right now, it seems to be working very well. I think there's some great stories within the index of the firms that have done so well, and there are firms that you thought would have done very well that haven't. So it's sort of eye-opening when you start to look at it that way.
Well, I was just going to ask you guys. So
let me try to add something else, if this works.
Yeah.
You're a little frozen, Bruce.
Okay.
So while you're doing that, I was just going to ask, so Brian, Laura, in terms of the two examples that we showed, the Foster Garvey and the Gunderson Detmer, I mean, those are not household names. Gunderson Detmer has been doing a lot in the lateral market. They're a tech firm on the West Coast. I don't actually know Frost Garvey that well.
Foster Garvey is the result of a fairly recent merger between, I want to say, Foster. They're two well-established Pacific Northwest firms.
Okay, got it.
2 or 3 years ago.
So in terms of your thoughts on this, like evening the playing field, like where we've said, like, having worked at a mid-sized firm and having worked at smaller boutique firms that are actually killing it out there, what are your thoughts on this, not just, sort of bringing to light and, putting all of the awards and accolades on those top firms? And what do you think this says to those firms that are the boutique firms, the mid-sized firms, and all that sort of stuff?
It speaks to the value of this index. It's one of the core values of the index, is that it's not going to just be parading out Cravath and Davis Polk and Sullivan and Cromwell year after year after year, some sort of like received hierarchy of excellence. It's a data-driven index. It's a dynamic index, and it's sort of I don't mean to be alliterative, it's democratic in the sense, and Laura's alluded to this before, but
Yeah.
it's truly casts a wide net and lets the data fall where it may, and then the data is what dictates the ordinal rank, and there's no gaming it. So I think that's you've identified one of the great virtues of this.
Yeah. Does it surprise you that Kirkland has been consistently at the top, I think the entire time?
The entire time, yeah. It doesn't surprise me. No. Their metrics are all very impressive.
Yeah.
And even, Kirkland did obviously they're doing really well financially, but they also did some very unique things during the pandemic in terms of shortening partner track and some other things to make it much more worthwhile for people to stay at the firm. So I think that was also interesting. Bruce, are you back with us? Do we have your audio?
I hope so.
Okay, good. Okay, so tell us all the great things you had planned to tell us.
So one of the things that, just to pick up on the conversation that was just going on, this particular index it's not quite right to say it's open source, but it's open. During Laura's presentation, you saw how you could drill down into the numbers and see how they were computed. The index is also dynamic in that, we reserve the right to discard things that don't seem to be working and add things that seem to be germane in the future. I wanted to add one other point to the economics discussion I was trying to have or launch a few minutes ago. I asked somewhat facetiously, but I was actually wrong in one detail. Profits per partner are a key performance indicator of what? And the answer for 99% of law firms in the world is nothing. But they are a key performance indicator for 1% of law firms, and that's the global elite. And it is the Cravaths and Kirklands and Lathams, Paul Weiss, Davis Polk, Cleary, the whole audience could come up with 12 or 15 firms off the top of their heads, and there would be tremendous, if not total, overlap between who those firms are. And for those firms, they are competing for talent at the absolute tippy top of the market. It's like, you want J-Lo at halftime at the Super Bowl, okay, but you're going to pay up. And so to those firms, profits per partner is it's funding for the arms race they're in the war for talent. For every other firm, it really doesn't matter. It might matter to your own partners. It's probably offensive to your clients. But some of the things that are in the index that I do think are KPIs for law firms across the board, one that we were a big advocate for here at Adam Smith Esquire was compound 5-year growth of RPL, revenue per lawyer. That's maybe our favorite metric for law firm performance, because revenue per lawyer tells you what a client or what clients are willing to pay to rent one of your lawyers for a year, right? And the more they're willing to pay, presumably the more highly they value what you do. But we didn't go by absolute level of RPL, because we know who'd steal the show if that's what we did, the usual suspects. But we went for compound annual growth, because if you're here's, not to pick on a firm, but Littler Mendelson, right? Category killer in employment law. But revenue per lawyer is just not going to be a sky-high number in that practice area. It's just not. So the question is, how are you doing, Littler, against the strategic plan you created for yourself, against the sandbox you're playing in? And if your RPL is going up a lot, you're doing very well. The last thing I wanted to mention, and then I'll shut up again, is the firms can use the Leopard Index as a self-diagnostic tool.
Yes.
Where are they falling down? Where are their numbers low? And Stephanie just mentioned, retention of associates. If you like your associates, if you think they're the future of the firm and you stink at retention, then you need to have a little conversation with yourself.
And I would just add, not to be Mr. Sunshine, but the inverse of that is also true. If people in the recruitment division of a firm can identify they do extraordinarily well in retaining associates and developing talent, that's something they can make apples to apples comparisons with other firms and come out ahead, and something to highlight. So there's sort of hard questions and self-reflection that can come out of it, but there's also sort of blowing your own horn that can come out of it. It just sort of depends on what the data tells us.
Yeah. And that's one reason why we have all of those breakdown graphs, right? So every firm can be benchmark against all of their competitors, right? Mm-hmm. And it's important because you may look at a metric and say, oh, well, 80%, that's not bad. That's pretty good. Until you see all of your competitors have 100 or 90. And then you say, oh, I guess it's not as good as I thought it was. So if you only know what your numbers are, you can be convinced those numbers are great if you have nothing to compare it to. But being able to compare your firm against your competitors is a really important thing to do. It's kind of like a gut check, right? Are we as good as we think we are? Are we doing as well in this area as we think? Because many times I think they're surprised when they see that 80% isn't so good. Not in comparison to their competitors. Yeah.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Could I just add a one cautionary note, and this comes from my frankly of experience as a consultant in this area, and also just being a student of business history, which I'm spend too much time on, but know thyself. In other words, if you're a lifestyle firm and that's who you are and that's the kind of people you attract and that's the market you serve and you're happy with that, maybe your compound annual growth of RPL is not going to be a great number. You know what? That's fine. You're not playing in that sandbox. You've got a different one. In that case, a number that you would want to have be sky high is retention.
Mhm.
You know, do people like it there? That's what you're trying to optimize for. The numbers are the numbers, and again, God bless the design and publication of the index, because it's open, and you can say, yeah, we have a low score on that, and that's where we want to be.
That's right. But it's also great because it's not based on a single metric. So while your RPL at your lifestyle firm may not be great, but your retention is great and your growth decline is great. You've got if you have great things in the other areas, you're going to have a good index score because it's not based on one metric.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask each of you to tell the audience what advice you would give to the firms that are in the fair to poor category? Because there are some firms that you wouldn't expect to be in those categories, and being a marketing person at a law firm or any market, any law firm person, a partner, head of recruiting, the COO, when you get, nobody, especially lawyers, do not like to hear that they're fair or poor. And it really tugs at them to get that criticism. So I know there are people on this webinar who are going to say, check this and say, okay, well, Leopard Solutions Index says that we're fair or poor. What advice do you have? So let's start, Brian, with you.
Sure. I mean, if a firm fares poorly using this methodology, I just have to sort of categorize that as an opportunity for self-assessment and focus on areas of improvement, asking yourself tough questions. Why do we have so much associate turnover? Why is this place still run by a bunch of white dudes? What's going on? They're simple answers, but very tough problems to solve. And so I guess, just don't be afraid to look the data right in the eye and ask yourself tough questions. It might sound a little cheesy, but I really do think that is an important, there's an opportunity there for firms.
Okay. Bruce, what do you think?
I would, if I were a firm in that position, and we know there are probably many, I would perform a thought experiment if I were on the executive committee or somebody in a position to do something about it. And the thought experiment is, we're going to have a press conference, or we're going to have a town hall, if you will, internally, firm-wide, and we're going to tell people about this crummy score, and we're going to tell a story about what that means, and if we think it's telling us something we may not want to hear, but we should pay attention to, what are we going to do about it? So that would force the firm, certainly the firm leadership, to say, to ask themselves in a profound way, we're going to hold your feet to the fire, figuratively, in front of the whole firm. What's up with this? You have no repeat clients, okay? So, if I'm a partner in the firm and I didn't know that, I would want to know why that was so and what the firm was going to do about it. Well, maybe you have no repeat clients because you're a white collar defense boutique, and hopefully these people aren't serial offenders.
Right. Yeah.
But there needs to be an explanation, and I think the thought experiment of the town hall really puts a point on it. It focuses your analytic urgency.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Laura?
The index wasn't created to be like oh, you're a bad firm, or you, it really was, if you think of it as it was created, a health index, and it helps the firm to diagnose where they have possible issues and where they could improve. I mean, that's why we did it, because we want to help firms. We help firms do well, to help them do better, and to help them diagnose some of their own issues. And sometimes that means comparing against the market or comparing against your competitors to see what is good and what is bad. So all of those comparisons, I think, are needed, but it was created to help see where your problems, lie. If you have an associate retention problem, is it a particular office, a particular practice area? Is it, associates that come from a particular firm or school? All of that can be looked at and diagnosed, and we lay it out for you. But it's a tool. It's a tool to help the firms improve if they choose to use it.
I'd like to close out today with some advice from each of you on what firms should be doing in general in 2022 and beyond, in terms of all of the factors that go into being a successful firm. To the best of your ability, feel free to focus on one metric or not. We obviously know there's a very competitive market for talent that's still continuing. So, Brian, what advice would you give firms right now?
I would choose as Laura noted earlier, we've ethnic diversity metric was added to the mix. I don't think we need to explain why that's so vital and relevant. I don't think it's hard to gainsay the idea that largely the profession is not having a lot of success in matching its actual diversity, its actual diversity with its rhetoric around the idea of diversity. And I've always thought that there's sort of a simple way forward that I hope isn't simplistic, and that is sort of broadening the conception of the candidate or the talent pipeline. As long as firms are utterly fixated on a particular narrow slice of candidates, and obviously the diverse candidates among that slice there's a real scarcity, then I don't think any real progress will be made. So good candidates can come from all over the place. And the way that we think that with this index, we've identified really successful, robustly healthy, and sort of compelling firms by just casting a wide net. I think that there's an analogous reconceiving of how to tackle diversity in firms.
Fair. Bruce, what do you think?
I'd like to expand on what Brian said and point to the larger macroeconomic context in which law firms live these days. The fact that we stink as an industry at retaining diverse candidates, we recruit plenty, frankly. If they stayed at the same rate as non-diverse candidates, the numbers would look good, but the numbers get worse and worse the more senior you get. So we stink at retaining them. That tells me something about the workplace environment it's not functioning for these people. But I want to point to the larger, as I say, macroeconomic environment. And there's a couple of kind of distant early warning signs out there that make me ask myself, and sometimes we ask our clients, how's the long-term viability of this business model? Law firms billing by the hour, with a single career track, associate and nothing else. How viable is this in the long run? And one of the signs I'd point to, which is it's a top 10, it's a top 2 or top 3 story in every legal media outlet these days is associate attrition and the comp wars. Well, whatever we're doing with comp, it ain't stopping associate attrition. It's just as high, it's higher than it's ever been as far as data goes back. And the comp wars are more violent than they've been as far as data goes back. So we're not solving the problem. Let me tell you what I'm saying when I say look at the macroeconomic environment. The big four accounting firms are major law firms in Europe, in South America, in Canada. It will happen here. It's a walking antitrust violation. At some point, it'll get challenged and fall. New law was not measurable in terms of market impact 10 years ago, and it's growing at talk about compound annual growth rates, 20, 30%, depending on who you believe. Thomson Reuters puts it in there somewhere. By new law, I mean basically every for-profit company that's not a traditional law firm. So, MacEwen was the example. Today, it's United Lex, Elevate, Kira, Relativity, all the tech plays, Mitra Tech, Intap, it goes on and on and on and on. Some of them are tech plays, some of them are human labor arbitrage plays. But be that as it may, they're providing some kind of service that clients value, given their growth rate. That's all I can say. And there's a multiplier effect. Every dollar that new law gets, in our estimation, based on data we've seen, live market data, take $3 out of the pocket of traditional law firms. Now, I'm not going to say there's no role for law firms, but there is, and there will be as far as the eye can see. But ask yourselves, why should a client come to us and not new law or the big four? I suspect if you don't have a snappy answer to that question, it may not kill you this year or next. But if you're a 40-something partner in one of those firms and your firm does not have a snappy answer to that question, I would ask it loudly and urgently inside your firm. It's not just law firms anymore. It's not just Walmart and Sears. Now it's Walmart and Apple and Amazon.
It's a great point. Laura, anything you want to leave us with, advice to firms?
Well, I totally agree with Bruce. And I do think there might be a sea change coming, right? So we had the pandemic, which forced a lot of changes in law firms, but it also did something else. It also made a lot of associates look around and say, this isn't how I want to live. This isn't my life. I don't want to work all these hours at this firm. I don't want to be a partner. Law firms exist because associates buy into the partner dream bargain, right? They're going to work 60 to 80 hours a week because they're on the partner track. And then one day they're going to get that brass ring of partner. But you've got a whole crop of people now, they don't care if they make partner ever. That's not on their bucket list. That's not what they're looking for. And when the firms are putting partnership for those that still want it completely out of reach, there's gonna be a break. There's gonna be a collapse in the middle of that model. And you're seeing some of the stresses of that now with terrible associate retention from some law firms that you would not expect to see that. And I think it's old and new. It's old and new beginning to wage that battle. So there's going to have to be a change to that partnership model in the long term. And it won't happen quickly, because nothing ever does. But if they start to look at data and pay attention to what it says, then they're going to see that that's coming.
I think that's a good place for us to end today. I mean, data doesn't lie. So if you're not using CI, if you're not using legal intelligence, you should be. And I hope this webinar was eye-opening to you guys as much as it was to me. I want to thank the panelists here today. I know, Laura, you wanted to just show the survey again.
Yes, I just wanted to remind everybody, get that QR code or copy that link to have women participate in our survey about women leading law. We've received some unbelievable responses to this survey, really eye-opening responses. And I really hope you pass it around, you send it to people who've left the law, or have left law entirely, or they've just started a different path for themselves. But we would appreciate your help in getting the word out about the survey, because it's going to be rather remarkable, I think, once it's finished. There were some.
All right, so thank you again to our speakers. There were a number of links in the chat. We will also do a follow-up. You can find a recording of this also on our YouTube channel afterward. We will send it to folks. Brian, Bruce, Laura, thank you so much. Check out the index on our website, which is updated 2 times a week. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks to Leopard for making this possible.
You're here.